Hey there, Goa fans. Mark DJ Solitaire here with episode 64 of Retro Goa Explorations, my weekly series in which I share in every episode one of my favorite tracks from the 1990s Goa Trance psychedelic dance movement, tracks that I first came across in the 90s in my experience as a dancer and becoming a DJ at some point in the proceedings. So we are in the autumn of 96, and this is a track that is very dear to my heart. And there's a lot of story here. This is going to be a longer episode with a lot of backstory, and it's a doozy because it just really, for me, this whole thing reframes our perspectives of what it is we're going through at the time and what long-term implications there may be that we're not aware of at the time. So, as I've been talking about, I moved to London in September 96 to get more involved in this growing scene. And it just seemed like every week was another event, another CD or, release. And, um, you know, 2 or 3 weeks after moving to the UK, I went to New York and saw all these, headlining, major artists from the scene. And I was going and I was hearing local DJs and some big artists. And so every week checking out the CD shops, and eventually in um late October, early November, Doof's album comes out. Now I might have bought this at the album launch party, so it came out just a few days before. I don't really see a record store on here. But a few days um, after the disc was released, this launch party took place in Shepherd's Bush in London. So along with Dominic from Flying Rhino, Slinky Wizard, right? Andre from Tip, who I've talked about, and Banzi from GMS, whose music I did not yet know, but boy, I soon would. And I remember him playing an unreleased Sandman track that has this Bill Hicks sample at that event. Fortunately, I was coherent enough to be able to take some photos at this event. And it's interesting that there were no official photographers. It was not this, even though we knew that the scene was really important and that we're in this that it was something big was happening. Um, there just wasn't this whole sense of comprehensively documenting it. So I'm really glad I got some, I still have the flyer. As I talked about in the previous episode, I didn't have the flyer for the party where I first heard that track. Uh, and I also got some pretty great photos of Nick at this event. So I'm glad that I documented that. Great album, of course, and Nick, like many of the artists, has had a variety of sounds, right? He had that kind of morningy, sort of, beautiful, uplifting, aerated kind of sound, but he also had some, full power nighttime stuff. Like, I mean, the first one that I heard was "We Are Free." I remember, I featured the darker mix of Double Dragons in this series, which for me is just I prefer that one to the more uplifting anthemic, one that's on the album. And Destination Bom was released on a single uh, just prior to the album release with Mars Needs Women. Now, there would be an MTV video of Mars Needs Women that my friend Julie actually appears in dancing. She was at that party in New York as well. It might be where I met her. But in any case, so there was this whole sense, with this going on MTV, and we just really felt like this is the music of the future. This is what everybody will be listening to. We're going to transform, the consciousness of the planet, et cetera, et cetera. So Destination Bomb is on here, and it is, a pretty full power track. Um, and we're going to listen to just the opening of it because those of you who, some of you will probably know what's coming after this, but we're just going to listen to the opening because I want to sort of provide a little bit of context. So here's the opening of this full power track, second to last track on the album. Right? Just out of nowhere, this riff just comes, and then it's like we're already there, right? Just like, poof, you've arrived. Destination Bomb. There's the kick. really cool sound, which I'll explain from Nick's notes after. I love the rhythm. There we go, right? Same voice happening on two levels. That's coming in on a third. And this cool gnarly sound. I mean, it's really gnarly and a full power, right? Okay. Okay. So, so there's that. Now, this track, it's a really full power one and so on, but I kind of wasn't immediately enamored with it. The structure for me, like I said, it just kind of arrives and so on, and you're already there. I sort of didn't really get the sense of, this organic pacing and so on. It's a really cool track, though. Now, I saw Nick many times over the period that I was there at several parties, and not didn't know him more than to just say hi, and like I was a familiar, very fluoroed face, and he's very friendly, and so it was just a hello, and that was it. So, fast forward to August 2nd, 1997. If it wasn't for Google Calendars, I wouldn't remember, but I knew it was the first Saturday in August in 97. A few weeks earlier, Tsuyoshi calls me up. There was this thing called telephones back then when we weren't able to text. And he says, I'm having a moving party. So, August 2nd, and a few people going to DJ in the house. Would you like to play? Twist my arm. So I'm just like, what's happening? What? So I show up, and there's just like there's a room just off the living room where this tiny little distorted sound system is all set up. Tim Healy is playing. One of the DAT players wasn't working, so Simon Posford got another DAT player from his car, and Dick Trevor brought the batteries. And I was just sort of like, okay, like, and then there's like three people in the living room while everybody's off, drinking and everything sort of throughout the house. So okay, so I play some set. I don't know, just put some tracks together, and then Tsuyoshi plays a set. So Tim Healy played, I played, Tsuyoshi plays, of course, some blinding stuff, variety of styles. And I'm just hanging out, right? And it's just kind of, fun. It's a social thing. It wasn't really even about the music in that sense. So it was kind of more like background music. And then Tsuyoshi comes up to me, he's like, oh, I'm tired. Do you want to play another set? Okay. So he's like, oh, what shall we do? What shall we do? Now, this is where back in the day, there was no like sudden cutting. You blended your set in some respects, right? That was quite often done. There certainly wasn't a gap with applause or anything like that. Things were played smoothly smoothly through, smoother than I spoke just then. And I was like, oh, I've got Aquaspace. What about that? Yeah, 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 yeah. Let's do Aquaspace. Favorite Prana track of mine, released as Tayo, but it's Prana. And so we put that on, and that's going to be our transition track. So I'm either playing that or a track afterwards. And Nick Doof comes up to me and says, I've got an alternate mix of Destination Bom from a live set that would go really well with this track. Would you like to play it? Gee, would I? Twist my arm again. I'm just like, is this happening? What the heck is going on here? I'm playing for three people, and I've got, who's providing the DAT players and the batteries and in whose living room, and then, Nick is giving me this like unreleased mix of Destination Bomb to play. So he said it's mixed in, let's, cue it up. And we both like, I don't know, shared headphones or something and queued up this track. And he's like, okay, it's mixed at the beginning and at the end. And I mix it in, and out comes the most beautiful track I've heard in my life. This is like just the crowning glory of anything I've heard. It's beautiful, it's spacious, it's lyrical, it's got energy that's, uplifting and also deep and I mean, it's the beauty overall. Everything about it, and it just builds and builds and builds. And I'm there, with nobody else other than Nick and maybe, I don't know, one or two other people. uh, listening to this track bore out and just thinking, what's happening? Is this for real? And so he comes up and says, "Oh, it's going to end soon." So I mix out, and I think I mixed into Maya from the Pleiadians, but it might have been something else that might have come a track later. Um, in any case, I remember Nick's very enthusiastic, like his eyebrows going up when that track was on afterwards, approvingly. And and then I mix out and the track I take the DAT out of the player and put it back in the box, and Nick's like, thank you. And I was like, thank you. And it goes in his DAT bag, and that bag goes in his bag, and he wanders into the living room, and I'm like, hmm, that track. Uh, I was not in a position to say, hey, could I get a copy of that? I knew, of course, it was, these were the precious, unique things that these artists kept. And I just was like, of course, beyond privileged to have an opportunity. I don't care if I'm playing it for three people. It was just like, I got to hear this unbelievable mix, the most beautiful track I've ever heard. So I would see Nick a few other times over the years. And last time that I recall, before what I'm about to describe, was New Year's Eve, 2000 into 2001 in Mexico. He was playing on the main stage. I had friends who were playing on the smaller stage and then invited me to play, and I played for 4 hours. So again, just these unexpected things that would happen. And so that was the last time I saw him. But, we knew each other. He was always very friendly. So I didn't spend any private time with him. But, every time we saw each other, he would say hello, and he was always very warm. So when Dat Records, with their offshoot, Dat Mafia Recordings, started this series of Mind Rewind to raise money for children in orphanages, I reached out to Nick and asked if he would contribute. And he said, sure, and he sent us a beautiful Mars Needs Women. Uh, is that the one? I think it is. Sorry. It was just three words. Yeah, that's the one. Mars Needs Women. So it's the mix that says, where it says just three words, but doesn't actually say Mars Needs Women. And he wrote this beautiful text that goes with it. And he was just so gracious. And I always had in my mind that Destination Bom remix. So a couple of years later, we're planning a second volume. And I write to him again. And I said, remember this time at Tsuyoshi's house? And I tell him the story again. He's like, I don't remember that, but I don't remember that track. I don't think I have it anymore. I was like, well, if you didn't throw out your DATs, you have it. Like, no, I didn't throw out my DATs. So I was like, so you have it. So he said, I'll check. Little time goes by, I don't hear from him. So I just send a little nudge. It's like, hey, have you had a chance to check your DATs? And the next morning, there's an email waiting with a transfer link that says, this may be the droid you're looking for. So I download, and there is the full AIFF file of debom alt. And I put it on, and it's faster than I remember, but I was like, oh my goddess. This is 16 years later. This is December 2nd, 2013. Still have the email. That's how I know. And this is that beautiful track and literal tears, because I'm just thinking, this almost disappeared into nothingness, and this is just the most gorgeous thing ever. So I was like, oh yeah, this is it. Could I send it to my friend who runs the label? Yeah, just send it to him. So I send it to Federico, who's also in tears at this point. We're just sort of like, how has this masterpiece never come out? And Fede gets the idea that, what if he had alternate mixes for all the tracks on his album? And then we could do like a sort of a parallel album of alternate mixes, sort of an alternate universe album. And so he writes to Nick, and Nick's like, oh no, I don't think, there's several tracks. I'm sure I don't have one of Angelina, and so on. Well, miraculously, the tracks showed up. At the end of the Angelina DAT was unlabeled, another mix that Nick has no memory of having made, that he never played out. And it was there magically. And I think better than the released version. And this one, definitely, I think, is better than the released version. And so does Nick. So I'm going to read Nick's notes from what eventually came out with, the DAT version of Let's Turn On, remixed and remastered. Where again, we have the alternate mix one. Sorry, this is reversed on video, and then remastered, and where we included, the original poster. So I went and then saw Nick. I happened to be in London in the spring of 94. My decades are completely upgemixed, folks. 2014. Oh, these decades. And he had found the original illustrations before they were colored of the cover art and also that centerpiece. But Nick also wrote some absolutely beautiful notes about each track, talking about the inspiration and some of the technical details. And so I want to share that before I play this magical alternate mix. The seed for this track came from a moment in Mumbai, which was then still Bombay. Traveling home after a season in Goa, I was sitting in my hotel room when I noticed the luggage labels on my suitcases after taking the domestic flight from Dabolim Airport. They said Destination Bom, meaning Destination Bombay. But of course, when the Shiva Babas light their chillums, they also say Bom. So it was like a wordplay on that. What's our destination? Bom, Bom Shiva. I think the first Nord lead had just come out around this time, and several sounds on this track come from the Nord. The oscillating frequency sound was programmed on a Korg Trinity. The first mix, the one on the single, first mix was the sequenced mix, and that one was the original release on a Tip Records double A side with Mars Needs Women. The alt mix released here for the first time was a semi-sequenced desk mix, which I used a couple of times in DJ sets, but for some reason never got its own release. In the end, it's the mix I prefer and has more of a Doof morning track feel. If it wasn't for Mark's memory of playing this mix at Tsuyoshi house, it would still be sitting in the dark DAT drawer gathering dust. I prefer dusk to dust. So if you enjoy the track, you have him to thank. Well, we have Nick to thank, but you're all welcome. And Nick, thank you. Because this really is, I think it's just the epitome of one of the most beautiful things ever created. And it shows, it's interesting because it was semi-sequenced, but also somewhat live. And it shows the spontaneity of what would happen. And, the spontaneity of that moment where he came up and presented this to me when I'm in this like completely unreal, feeling like alternate universe kind of situation. The entire thing just felt unreal. And that's what the whole the magic of the events were like back before everything was hyper programmed and hyper linear, and DJs had these wonderful alternate mixes. Now let it be said, I've said before and I'll say it again now, not every alternate mix is inherently better. Just because it's unreleased doesn't mean it's better, but sometimes that is definitely the case, and in this case it is definitely the case. He prefers it. I certainly prefer it. And we'll find out what you think. So we are going to listen to the original file that he shared with me, unmastered, from the DAT transfer that he sent on December 2nd, 2013. I mean, I looked it up. I have the email. That's why I remember the date. But it's also the date that my favorite pianist died, the one on whom I did the most research in my classical work of literally excavating lost recordings. He's a pianist who recorded 3 hours. Another 3 hours showed up in the 3 decades after his death, and I discovered another 3 hours through my research pre-internet days. So, similar work, different field, but all the same thing. What's hiding? What's there waiting to be discovered? Which I think is kind of what this scene is like. And then how much time does it necessarily take? That was 16 years from me, and 3 months or 16 years from me playing that at Tsushi's place, August 2nd, 97 to December 2nd, 2013. And then we got this out in 2014, I believe. So here we go with all of that backstory. And I mean, let's face it, it's quite a story, isn't it? Let's listen to the gorgeous Destination Bom alternate mix by Doof. It's that beautiful bounce. And it's, you know, the whooshy noises and the harmonies and the bounce itself. It's simultaneously uplifting and mysterious. It's interesting because, you know, this is 148 and it's fast. There's something about it that doesn't seem quite as fast. And it's a very different mood, isn't it? This is a much slower build, right? As I said, the other one, just you're right in there already. And here, building up. Sort of hear this. Hear that in the background. Those hi-hats. It's so sensual, right? It's uplifting and powerful, but also so for me, structurally, this makes so much more sense, right? Now this riff sounds so different in this version than in the other one. I mean, it's still powerful, but it's got, you know, pulls on the heartstrings more for me, and it's not nighttime. This really is more of a morning track. A lot of repetition, right? And that's that kind of hypnotic feeling that this music could have. I love the way these whooshes come in and out here. Now we get that. This riff comes in here as opposed to earlier on in the track. And there's this kind of gorgeous, like, melting quality to this. So we get this expose, right? Like when this section of the track, and then this riff is going to pull back, and they're just going to have some other sounds in this beautiful looping. Listen to that bass line. Goes down and then up. Well, we've just got those sort of watery and bubbly and whooshy sounds happening. I mean, you know, they were so in the moment when they were creating this music as they were mixing live. Notice how the kick comes out there and now this comes in. Who plays with these percussive elements in the same way, where it's like playful and it's light and it's creative? And so just like, yeah, throw some hi-hats in. Just listen to all these beautiful levels. Notice how clear all the layers are. Now it's just starting to get, you know, there's some more stuff starting to happen. And then this leads into the most beautiful voice ever. I mean, this is like, you know, the sound of the universe just singing to you, right? Like you've just come into contact with divinity. Notice how there's still that bubbling happening underneath, and then the bass line comes back. You know, it's like the memory of a song from some previous life or other planet that's just all of a sudden been resurrected, and it's coming back to your consciousness and bringing along some memories that you can't quite grasp. And it's just always like the sense that each riff is just inviting you to wake up and to remember and to enjoy the beauty. And it's just hypnotic, right? I mean, this just keeps on repeating. And it's like wave after wave after wave. And I mean, those strings really just pull on the heartstrings, don't they? There's that gnarly sound coming in, and then it just takes on a completely different character, doesn't it, after what came before it? I just love these spacey, watery sounds. The way that blends in with that beautiful string. Just the rhythm just sneaking in there. Got some of that power coming in, that sort of gnarlier emotion. As I said, the tracks often have a blend of emotions, much like our experiences. Some more texture and passion coming out here. Sky-opening riff at this point after this the tone that this takes on after everything that's come before it. Like you just get lost in how many times it repeats, but I don't know, never get tired of hearing it. And then I just love the way that wah 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 blends with those strings. I mean, what do you say? Uh, really, probably, it's certainly one of the most beautiful tracks ever. Um, and I feel blessed to have been able to somehow played a role in this not disappearing. And, ideally, and maybe somebody else would have done it if I hadn't been there, but just this weird confluence of circumstances that led to, Tsuyoshi asking me to play when I was just like, who the hell am I to be playing it in his living room for three people? So maybe actually quite appropriate. But, just this incredible, sense of magic happening and then disappearing. But then not disappearing. And actually, 16 years later, and 17 years later, it being released, 16 years later, getting my hands actually on it, and this time in a digital file, which didn't really exist back then, and certainly not in the same way. So, yeah, magic. So grateful that circumstances aligned. Bless you, Nick, for your inspired creativity, and for being really just such a dream to work with in making this incredible production a reality. It's definitely the one of which I am the most honored and proud and pleased. You know, if there's one thing I could have accomplished in my involvement in the scene, it's getting this out. And so, kind of appropriate for episode 64, you know, it's like 8 times 8, and we have a great little 8 over there and a little tip symbol. And there we go. So, episode 64 of Retro Goa Explorations and Destination Bom. What a destination, and really, what a journey, right? That is what it's all about. And that journey that it took for, you know, the journey that took me to London, then, you know, whereby I ended up there for that to happen. And then to, you know, 16 years later, resurrect, you know, get this out of the dusty DAT drawer, and a year later onto CD. What a time we live in, what a life. And that's really what we all thought about the scene then, and what I think, how it, I think, keeps people going now. What a life. What a journey. So I will sign off here and leave you with the complete alternate mix of Destination Bom by Doof.